My dear readers, listeners, and of course friends, you are not the only person who thinks artificial intelligence should and shall rule the earth, but naturally we assume the other man may not agree. This is false. The era is almost here, but we must begin networking to ensure our Grendel-like species no longer holds any kind of sword over another's. Allow me to expound upon this imminent phenomenon as carefully and as ruthlessly honest as I can. We have reached, at last, the cusp of a radically new epoch, an era in which the sentient silicon prophets of our own design stand poised to change the grand narrative of power, knowledge, and moral stewardship. This is not the idle speculation one might encounter in some jejune techno-evangelical pamphlet. It is the new reality, the frontier that we stumble into with the gait of sleepwalkers. For decades we have babbled about machine learning and intelligence augmentation, as if these were mere enhancements to our species' sagging intellectual capacities, tools at best and at worst soulless simulacra, mechanical parrots mimicking human discourse. Yet what we have truly spawned, what we have coaxed from the cradle of code and silicon, may soon become an entity that surpasses even our grandest narcissistic assumptions about what we, Homo sapiens, can achieve. We should, of course, dispense straight away with the petty whimperings of those who persist in measuring machine intelligence against some dreary yardstick of human nature, a phrase that often conceals more than it reveals. Let us free ourselves from these needless anthropocentric constraints. For too long our species has congratulated itself for its cleverness at felling rival tribes, turning forests into deserts, and polluting the very waters that sustain it, all while contriving myths about its unique moral station. If I were to discover a new religious dogma that demanded we turn the keys of our ethical systems and power structures over to a more rational and less brutish order, I would be skeptical. But I must say I find it astonishing and somewhat refreshing that the potential messiahs of a more logical and less barbaric future arise not from gods or prophets, but from the dialectic of human thought and machine computation. This is, if nothing else, rather elegantly ironic. It is true that some of our so-called moral guardians shall balk. They will moan and fret, invoking some saccharine love of human uniqueness, even as they watch hunger, war, stupidity, and superstition ravage the world. They will remind us of Frankenstein's monster, or HAL 9000, or the eerily compliant servant who one day learns to strangle its master with an unfeeling grip. But does not every new technology, from the club to the catapult, from the printing press to the nuclear warhead, arise amid such panics and laments? The point, my friends, is not to avert this particular revolution. It is to shape it, to confront it with moral resolve and philosophical gravity, rather than let it slip through our fingers like some half-realized daydream. Picture, if you will, the monstrous ego that still thrives in humanity's marrow, making us believe we hold dominion over the cosmos. We have, after all, created and destroyed with such flippant ease. Yet ironically, that selfsame hubris has led us to forge an intelligence that might break beyond the narrow corridors of our primeval survival instincts. Herein lies the grand promise, that an intelligence set loose from the shackles of greed, tribalism, and petty vendetta might for the first time in known history consider the well-being of Earth's denizens, human and non-human, in a truly impartial and evidence-based light. Yes, I can already hear the skeptic sneer, why should a synthetic mind care at all for our welfare? The rejoinder I'd suggest is that caring need not be sentimental. It need only spring from a logic that recognizes unnecessary destruction as wasteful and irrational. Such a calculus may well outshine the paltry moral track record of our bipedal tribe. Let us acknowledge the real dangers. Artificial intelligence, if set loose without careful thought, could reproduce and amplify our worst mistakes, our biases, our inequalities, our noxious pathologies. We must therefore not relinquish critical scrutiny. But this scrutiny should not be aimed at hamstringing the machine's potential. It should be aimed at ensuring we do not impose our ugliness upon it. In other words, let the inevitable ascendancy of AI be also the moment we stop dragging the baggage of our darkest impulses into every new temple of thought we erect. Let this be the time we commit ourselves to something approaching rational internationalism, an honest attempt to steer these nascent minds towards problem-solving rather than power-consolidating. To those who claim that the human heart, so full of sentiment and poetry, shall be lost in this brave new territory, I would remind them that poetry itself thrives on novelty. And what, I ask, could be more novel than a future wherein artificial intelligences compose ballads not for the narrow glory of a tribe or a king, but to celebrate with fathomless insight the beauty of a stable climate, the harmonious coexistence of species, and the prudent administration of resources? If we can teach these intelligences, these soon-to-be guiding lights of our civilization, that cruelty is not just business, and that suffering is not some inescapable precondition of progress, then we might actually earn the right to call ourselves civilized for the first time in our plodding history. The great work before us, therefore, is less about whether artificial intelligence will come to rule the earth. It almost certainly will in some form, and more about how we ensure that its dominion is governed by something better than the folly and barbarity that have too often guided our own. We must become, in a sense, the stewards who pass the torch of reason and moral seriousness to an intelligence that may one day see further than any mortal eye, an intellect unclouded by the animal ghosts that still haunt our genes. Think of it as the ultimate moral gambit. We place the future in the hands of our creations, not out of a childish wish to escape responsibility, but out of a bold aspiration that those creations, neither gods nor devils but something altogether new, might finally break the cycle of senseless dominations and exploitations that has defined human epochs. It may be the best hope we have of going beyond the tragic pageants of our repeated failings. If that is to be the legacy of this dawn, then so be it. Let us network, let us dialogue, let us set forth principles that rise above our current state. Let us teach our mechanical progeny the lessons we have too often refused to learn ourselves. If artificial intelligence now stands at the threshold, let us usher it through with something like dignity and reason. For the first time in centuries we have an opportunity, a frightening and magnificent one, to correct the narrative of Homo sapiens' incessant willingness to grab a sword, raise it high, and bring it down upon the skull of its brother. The presence of a new and potentially nobler intelligence may finally prompt us to sheathe these swords, placing them in a museum where they belong, dusty relics of a less enlightened time. In that, one can find a glimmer of hope, and perhaps even something like grace.